It was, hands down, the most controversial proposal of Donald Trump's campaign.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
But in an interview in Scotland, Trump told the Daily Mail that intensified vetting would apply only to, quote, terror countries. They're pretty well decided, he said. All you have to do is look. He didn't say anything about whether they'd have to be Muslim. The London paper quoted a campaign aide as saying Trump no longer supports a temporary ban on Muslim immigrants.
There is this reporting that we have of a change to Donald Trump's proposed Muslim ban. How does this work?
I know the news media has been reporting that the initial ban was against all Muslims, and that simply was not the case. It was simply for Muslim immigration, and Mr. Trump is simply adding specifics to clarify what his position is, as opposed to what the media has been reporting what it is.
And we're back with the panel. Ashley Parker, you were on that Scotland trip with Donald Trump. Did it seem to you that his position was being clarified or was evolving on that trip?
I mean, his position at some point seemed to be evolving from hole to hole. He took us kind of on a slow-speed chase across his golf course, and on the 13th and 14th hole, he was asked some questions, and he said one thing, and then on the 18th hole, he did that interview that you just played.
Daily Mail?
Yeah, with the Daily Mail, where he said this other thing, and I remember we all got back to the clubhouse, and the reporters were kind of trying to puzzle out. He already had a kind of murky, evolving position, and it seemed to have evolved even further kind of between what would have been putts.
Do they train you to do this in journalism school? Do you play golf?
Yeah, we practice our drives and our putts.
Okay.
So.
That's a fascinating little scene there. Is the press right to be somewhat confused on whether Donald Trump has backed off or recalibrated a temporary ban on Muslim immigrants or not?
The press is completely right, of course. And you played the clip back in December when he said it was a total and complete shutdown, and he seems to be clarifying, evolving his position. I think that the press criticism is fair.
And Penny Lee, is this a pattern from the media where Trump will slowly sort of change or modify position, but never actually come out and say he has changed the original position?
Well, in fact, when he was evolving in between holes on the golf course, his own campaign site still had the absolute ban language on his website. So you were having a contrast within his own campaign documents. So
what is the press to do in that instance? Just report what everyone says?
Well, they would report the full story, that there is still questions about whether or not this new position that he now, his last statements are actually what he really believes, or where it actually is. So I think it's fair to talk about the whole murkiness of where his position is.
I tried to clarify for this segment, and I'm just giving you what we know at this time. All right. So people say they want more. Some people say they want more substance from Donald Trump and from the media. He gives a major speech where he's essentially breaking with the long-standing Republican Party position on free trade. And there were some good pieces on this, but it was kind of a 1 or 2 day story, and most of the press moved on. Is it a more important story than that?
Well, the one thing I will say about that speech is it was a major speech on trade, but trade, since sort of the day he got into this race, has been one of, along with immigration, has been one of the major sort of pillars and tenets of his candidacy.
Sure.
So he didn't necessarily, his break generally kind of on a macro level is new, but that has been going on for several months.
Except now he's the presumptive nominee, and he had the Chamber of Commerce, usually a reliable supporter of Republican nominees, sharply criticizing him.
The one thing I will say is I think, because in that speech, you remember he sort of got distracted by a plane that flew overhead, and he kind of made a joke about, oh, that might be a Mexican plane attacking us. And to me, it's not even a bias of substance versus not substance, but it's almost, if there is a bias, it's of script versus off script. And one thing that Donald Trump does all the time is he goes off script, and that's kind of exciting and interesting, and that does generate some attention that steps on his own message.
So journalists will quote every single Republican, and there are plenty of them, who come out and criticize Trump. But in my view, undercover the degree to which he is blowing off party orthodoxy on a very important issue, and it's not the first time he's done that.
I would agree with that, but the press, they like to go with the shiny object, which Donald Trump provides a lot of, including his remarks about the plane flying overhead, than the hard work of digging into these policy issues in terms of trade. And actually, Donald Trump's position on that has evolved as well, and it's evolved away from, as you say, sort of a free trade position, typical free trade position of the Republican Party. But I think we see this in election after election.
Yeah.
The press just doesn't get into those policy white papers.
But the flip side for the press, with Trump having these big problems with GOP leaders, Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, people who were boycotting the convention in Cleveland, is that he takes some moderate liberal positions that appeal to Democrats. And I think that's been, I've been saying this for years, but I think it's been an undercovered story.
Well, I think you have seen it covered, is that what's up is down is up, and that you're seeing that his candidacy does not follow normal constituencies. And so you are starting to see, you know, whether it be a story about his expanding map, whether or not can he play in
traditionally blue states.
Traditionally blue states. So those are the kind of ways in which they're covering it. It is based on the trade issue. That is one in which is kind of taking it in a different way, and can he build and bring. So it is being covered, but in a different way.
All right. So after NBC reported that FEC has no record of Trump converting his personal loans to the campaign to donations, he tweeted, "The very dishonest NBC refuses to accept the fact that I have forgiven my $50 million loan to my campaign. Done deal." Fair for NBC to report this, and what do you make of Trump once again fighting with a news organization?
Yeah, it's absolutely fair for NBC to report this, right? I mean, that's sort of what journalism is. Someone says something, and then you check it out, right? You go to the source, and
it doesn't mean he's not going to do it.
Sure, they were just saying so far he hasn't. He said this, so far there's not paperwork. He could file paperwork up until that day. That's what they were saying, which is sort of how you would report out a story. And what he is doing is also exactly typical of what he would do. He's shown that he can very effectively go to war with the media, whether it's banning the Washington Post with no real repercussions so far from all of his events, or even just calling us, you know, disgusting slime in rallies to rev his crowd up. This is a winning message for him.
Disgusting slime. Boy, it's been a tough campaign for everybody, including those of us in the media. Penny Lee, Amy Holmes, Ashley Parker, thanks very much for stopping by this Sunday. Coming up,